So I want to ask you ladies, do you think times have changed?
Not as much
No.
as we wanted to. No.
Not at all. Not at all.
I will say that we've seen, of course, some sweeping revolution, and that sweeping revolution in the streets, in the grassroots organizations who have
Yes.
working for this thing. Some things I'll be optimistic to say some things have changed. We now have the right to vote. We see Stephanie saying no. To a lot hasn't changed. Neil Taylor saying no. A lot has changed. I will say 1960, I'll put this out for just so you can think about it for context. When my parents were born, we could not sit in the same restaurant, or their parents could not sit in the same restaurant as a white person. 1964 is when the Civil Rights Act, which did away with de facto segregation, was outlawed. We still have de jure, but we're not going to talk about that. De facto. So now we have to deal with areas in Chicago and areas that are majorly segregated by choice now, as opposed to by law. And so I'll say we're different as we have gotten rights, as we have gotten things on our seemingly on our side, but have things really changed? Are we in a different position? Are we on a level playing field? And right out bat, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Black Lives Matter. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Because when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying only Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And we saw Tuesday, what happened was that so many people joined in the conversation. It was so beautiful to see so many people allowed with their outside voices joining into the conversation saying, yes, Black Lives Matter. But then you have all these people who I'm not going to call internet trolls, because they're real people who believe when we say Black Lives Matter, we say only Black Lives Matter. No.
Right.
Just imagine you have a pie, and a slice of that pie is not in the pie. We're talking about the slice of pie that's not in the pie. Yes, all lives matter, but until I'm incorporated into the whole, I'm not included in that. Until I'm incorporated into the whole, until I can go to a grocery store, until I can go to a regular store at the mall at Millennia or at a big mall and not be followed around, I'm not a part of the pie. It's not that your life doesn't matter. We're saying, just bring us back in so that we can make it like you guys, so that we can be a part of the conversation where we don't have to say, give us justice. We can say justice for all.
Right.
I think that's the goal for everybody. What do you ladies think?
Absolutely.
I saw a meme that also gave the illustration of the fire department. And also saw another powerful one. The fire department going to a house that's on fire. And it's almost saying all houses are on fire, but it's not your house at the moment that's on fire. Right. I saw an amazing one that talked to the Jesus going after the 99. You know, Jesus says that he will go after, if the 99 are safe in the sheepfold, that he will go after the one. And right now, African Americans in America are the one that are being targeted. We are the ones that do not have the equal protection of the law. They say justice is blind, but I just personally believe in my experience throughout the centuries, that it has unfairly shifted and not been exacted in our favor, where there's clear injustices that has occurred. Again, going back to Emmett Till, you know, the jury that convicted him, because at that time you had to be registered voters to serve on juries, and that's some places are different today, but we're excluded. We weren't able to vote, so we weren't able to be in that jury pool. Right. So there was no way that people would convict another white man, especially if the crime was against someone of color. So when I think one of the things that makes it so difficult right now is that, you know, people don't understand. They don't understand why this is so, why people are so angry, why is things on fire. And it's like, oh, well, that's not the way to protest. And I won't get into that. I won't make a judgment about that. But I will say
if a building is more important than a body, leave me.
But to understand the context, that for centuries, not just since the 60s, since the 1860s, the 1760s, the 1660s, we have not had justice for people of color in this country. So at what point can we just be considered no longer 3/5 of a person, but a whole entire breathing person who is made in the image of God?
Right. I've got a few comments here. I'm going to read from there, and then we'll let you we'll get some input from Valerie. Stephanie says, I can't feel safe until my son can walk home with a hoodie. Until that happens, I'll say Black Lives Matter. Agreed. Until we don't have to think about the clothing we wear in order to be safe. Until the moment that I don't have to walk out with the mindset that that my skin is a part of my outfit. I'll stop saying it. Christ International Church. Go ahead. Why do you think so many people get offended by the BLM movement? You ladies are free to answer, but I think they look at some of the things that are happening with the protests, not the protests, with some of the rioters, and they equal that out to Black Lives Matter. Everything, there was another meme. If you think the rioters make the protesters look bad, then the police officer who kills makes the whole police department look bad. Right. One bad apple spoils the whole, we hear this wording about the police department is one bad apple. But you don't say the rioters are one bad apple. We have to think about what is being portrayed. There are millions of people out marching across the globe. I saw an image on CNN. 50 of 50 states have had peaceful protests for George Floyd. When was the last time 50 of 50 states did anything?
And like you said before, international. So it's just not the US, all 50 of the United States having protests, but it's also international. And I think that is, to me, first of all, to go to the first part, Black Lives Matter have been under scrutiny way before just this incident, because it's like, well, Blue Lives Matter, all lives matter. Right. However, it's not blue lives that are just laying in the streets with no justice. It's not all lives matter, because if Ray killed Junebug, Ray is in jail, he's convicted, and he is sentenced. However, there are countless people of the people that I looked at who never received justice. We now have a lynching museum dedicated to the victims in Georgia right now. The Equal Justice Initiative, started by Brian Stevenson, and it's there because these people have never received the justice that they were deserving of. And so many times, and as I was going through the stories, they were saying, oh, then later the person recanted and everything like that. But these lives are still, they're gone. They're gone, and there's no justice. And that notion, that thought has permeated through the centuries. This is not a 21st century or 20th century issue. This is through the centuries. Going back to your second point, I personally feel embarrassed that as Americans, other countries see the wrongness in what happened, and they're also joining in the protest, and we have people here who don't see it.
Right.
To me, that's embarrassing.
I think in reality, and I'm gonna touch on this may ruffle some feathers. There's still just a spirit of superiority. I'm better than you. I need to be above you. This is why Black Lives Matters is undermined by All Lives Matter. You know what I'm saying? It's a way to discredit the movement, to say, well, it's not really about you and what you go through and the pain that you've had to endure all these years. It's really just about all of us. It's a way to deflect from the real issue and the real roots that don't want to be addressed, because some people truly still don't care.
Yeah.
You know, there is no value there. So in essence, what they do is
that's
go ahead.
And when I was watching the video, it took me until this week, because I wanted to challenge people to, in preparation, to just educate themselves, see things. So I forced myself to watch it. And that was something that, as I watched that officer with his knee on the neck of another human being, I saw that there was a disregard of life, and it was more about a dominance and control. Power. You know, then we later heard, like, the next day, oh, we're going to take control and we need to dominate. Not so much. That's not, when people dominate, that's the issue. You know, that's how people die. That's how, even, you know, a lot of people are calling what has happened to Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, a baby. They've called it modern day lynching, because whoever responds becomes the judge, the jury, and executioner, and the justice is executed swiftly, severely, right there. So since when did playing with a cap gun become a capital offense? Or even if he was guilty, since when is, even if he struggled, because there's been some, well, if he just obeyed, if he just listened to the commands, blah blah blah,
the criminal,
then he wouldn't have died.
He's got respiratory issues.
But even in all of that, are those capital offenses? And it's a jury of your peers, so it's just more than one person,
right?
And unfortunately, because there has been throughout the centuries no accountability, that mindset is allowed to permeate. So until there is accountability, maybe there'll be a change of mindset, maybe there'll be a change of heart. People will be more conscientious of the fact that these are people. This is a human being. This is a individual who has been created in the image of God. And I think that and I'm working on a project, and one of them is Humanity Under Fire. And I think that's why Black Lives Matter means so much. Our humanity and our ability to just live as humans and have our humanity respected has been challenged since we arrived in Jamestown in 1619. We have not been considered full breathing people in the image, made in the image of God. You know, as you said, property, 3/5 of a person. Not even a whole person. You know, back in slave days, I cannot even trace back my lineage, because for African Americans, we were considered property. It just made me so sad when I watched the movie Harriet. The advertisements, it was okay, one sow and one bull, one buck, like, and they were describing people as that, not actual bulls and bucks and sows, but actually human. Someone who's made in the image and likeness of God.
And I think that's important to bring up in the history of America, and in the fact that it's a real thing that we're talking about. It's in the history books. A lot of people are underinformed about it because of the way history is told from the viewpoint of the conqueror.
Yeah, right.
It's his story.
Yeah, his story, as opposed to the one who
has been conquered.
right?
Right.
We got some comments here. I'm going to go to them. Then we're going to talk about racial discrimination and really parse that out, what that means as opposed to blatant racism. Comments. Let's see. Hello, Sylvia Rivera. I think people against BLM just simply do not understand because they choose not to understand that it's wrong, and that's wrong. I agree. Sometimes it's just a mental block they choose not to see. Dogs get more respect. You said it. It's dehumanizing. Yes. Man created in the image of God. Troy White, my 15-year-old daughter is really messed up behind this. How do we talk to our children about what's going on? Yes. How do we, before we go there, we are gonna go there. But before we do that, let me read a definition to you, because we know racism is, just believing your race is superior. But there's nuance to discrimination. There's nuance to discrimination that it's not blatant. And I really do believe it's like the iceberg, the iceberg thing. You only see just a little bit, but the damaging part is majorly underwater. We know when we see KKK. We know when we see people who are blatant racists, who kill people. We know when we see that. But it's the stuff. Racial discrimination, according to Wikipedia. Any discrimination against individuals based on their skin color or ethnic group. Individuals can discriminate by refusing to do business with, socialize with, or share resource with people of a certain group. If your circle all looks like you are a part of the problem. Correct. Let's talk about racial discrimination and how it pertains to colorism within the race, within the minorities. Valerie, can you tell us about that?
So I want to, can I just jump in real quick? And as we're talking about discrimination, Nichelle Reed, my sister, made a question about why whites are allowed to question officers, but blacks are not. So I think that goes into the discussion of discrimination. We all saw the pictures of the protesters who wanted to get their hair done and wanted to go golfing, wanted to go to the dentist, and they were in the midst of this pandemic, uncovered, rifled down to the teeth, in the faces of officers,
Mm-hmm.
And nothing happened.
Right.
All right, Val, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No. So I just wanted to touch on, I'm going to speak as a Latina now, because
talk about it.
I have seen a huge division about this since I was little, really, and also huge colorism in the Hispanic community as it pertains. I have, and I'll say this because I understand it now, I have benefited from being a light-skinned Latina. I just have. I'll be honest with you. I haven't had to face the same discrimination or prejudices as my counterparts who are darker in skin, than me. So I understand, and I provide a space for them to be able to truly listen to them and understand where they are coming from an experience that I have never had, honestly. And so for my fellow Latinas, for my people who are not African American, you need to get educated on this. It's important to understand what your roots are. So when I talk about the Hispanic community, I'm talking about, we have African American in our blood, Native American, Spaniard. We are a huge mix from countries like Panama to Puerto Rico to the Dominican Republic to Cuba. We should all be united and fighting for Black Lives Matter, regardless. There is no distinction between a light skin and a dark skin Hispanic or a Black person. We are all, we should all be united together as allies. So it's been interesting for me to see how, there's been a division between the Latino community. There are a lot of people who are Hispanic who are out there marching, protesting, doing what they need to do, and I'm so loving it. And then there are other people who are making it about them. Well, what about us? What about the Hispanic? It's not about you, boo.
It's not about
this
you.
Is not the time for you. This event is not about you. And so we need to put that to the side, and we need to work on being an ally, a true ally. And going back to a little bit about kids and Elder Troy, what you said, I want to touch base on this because racism starts at home.
At home.
If you do not educate your children about racism, about prejudice, about the real life world, and you shelter them, you are making a mistake. You are not educating them to be able to not only stand up for themselves, but stand up for others who may need it. You know, I'm going through this right now with my children. I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old who are deeply invested in this. You know, they're Afro-Latino. I'm married to a Black man, you know, and so with this, my daughter is a little bit darker skinned and my son is very light skinned. But regardless of anything, I need them to be aware of the injustices that our fellow African Americans, you know, are facing right now, and how to get involved and how to voice their opinion. You know, there's a lot of vicarious trauma going on right now, and we need to be able to process it, talk about it, and move forward by making a real change. And that will not come by being silent and making this about ourselves.
And being insular. Insular meaning us and us alone. I've seen so many comments, so many videos where people are brave enough to say, this is not my fight. What? This is not my fight? I'm going to go to a comment in the comment section because it's really talking about, but that insular thing, that we're so proud of where we're from, that we can't reach out to someone who's not where we're from, is toxic. Yeah. I'll say this. The first racism I experienced was not white to Black. I'm going to say this. I love you all, but I have people in my family who still not have posted anything about this. I'm out to be for context. Everyone doesn't know me. I am Hispanic, half Puerto Rican. I am half Black. I am 100% me. Always, every day. I have family who still have not spoken out against this, something that is in their family. And so the first racism I experienced was not white on Black. It was Hispanic on Black.
Yep.
Wow. And for me, as a Christian, I have a hard time with the silence. And that's kind of what I hear you both saying, that there are people who are able to speak out, who have been quiet. MLK said, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Yeah. And I don't understand how you can call yourself a friend to me, to Valerie, to Tabitha, and not be concerned, curious at all with anything that pains us.
Questions.
My best friend's mom just passed away. And, you know, there is, I cannot not be impacted by that. I cannot be, because I love her as my sister. There's no way that can just go, that can just fly. And right now, African Americans in this country are hurting. Do our friends care? And for me, I am more concerned and disturbed by the silence of the church, by my sisters and brothers who, you know, if we were in church, would love and hug, and, you know, they'll post things on Facebook and things like that. But their social media is just so quiet right now. You know, I have a hard time with that. And you mentioned something earlier, I forget, Tabitha, it was about the segregation. And Martin Luther King said in 1947, 57, I'm sorry, that the most segregated hour in this nation is at 11 a.m. So when you are only surrounded by people who look like you live in neighborhoods that look like you will only worship God, who has a body, and it's not just all thumbs, it's not all arms, it's not all legs, but it's diversity even in the body of Christ. And you have part of the body right now that's on fire. The feet is on fire, but the hand is like, okay, well, it ain't me, so I don't care.
And this
how can it not be? And we are called to be the body of Christ. How is that?
And that goes back to what I was saying before when we were talking about the pie. That highlights it. If you don't feel it's not me, you're exactly saying you're not a part of the pie. And we're shouting from 5,000 miles away, Black Lives Matter, because you don't feel our pain. We're on fire. And you don't even want to give water. You want to say, no, give everybody water. Like, but you're not on fire right now.
Right. You're not.
due to what happened in the injustice of African Americans, how can I help my child with the understanding without causing trauma? How can we heal from both injustice and COVID-19? Thank you. That's Crystal Hansen. Going back to what Valerie was saying about letting your child know, I think it goes both ways. Black people have had to have the talk with their child since
Ever.
Always.
since
Ever.
we have to
16,
have the
19.
talk with our child. I think it's right time you have to have the talk with your child. I think it's right time that not only African Americans, when Dove did that commercial saying have the talk, there was so much Karen madness. Karen was mad. Karen was upset. We were in a church. I'm not going to say any words, but Karen was mad. That how dare Dove take a stance and highlight something that's been going on in the community that is underprivileged, underserved, overpoliced, overjudged, underfunded,
undersupported.
Undersupported by the government, by their own church, that we are all a part of the body. Yeah. And I think it's just really, we can pass on the information without the trauma. We were talking about this earlier, how we can give the information. My grandmother she experienced segregated South, where she was not able to drink from the water fountain. We're talking about my grandmother. We're not talking about great-great-grandmother. We're talking about 60 years ago. It was okay to say you cannot drink from my water fountain. 60 years ago, you cannot say get over it. It's not you. My grandmother experienced this. And so it's how do I get, and it's hard, ladies. How do I pass this on to my children when I have it without passing them my trauma, without passing them my anger about it, but for them to be vigilant about how they exist in the world, knowing that as Elder Troy pointed out earlier, your race is a clothing that you wear, but not allowing your race to be a chip on your shoulder. Let's talk about that.
That is a very challenging thing to do. Because you mentioned a few different ideas that I would want to hit on. Let's go first with healing. It's hard to heal from something that continues to happen.
Right.
No, people of color are no longer being swung up from trees or burned, tied to a tree. Lord. The methodology, the terminology has just changed. It went from chattel slavery to black codes to Jim Crow to mass incarcerations, to redlining, to over policing, the war on drugs. It went a lot of different places. So it just changed. It never stopped. The bleeding has never stopped. It just went leaking from a different place. So it's hard to heal from something that continues to happen. Mm-hmm. And I think I have a lot of different feelings and thoughts on this, because one, it's kind of hard to convey it and communicate it. It's just hard because it's a traumatizing thing. But I also believe that it is possible for us to heal, and we're going to just have to do it. We're going to have to accept the apology that we don't get. It's easier and quicker to heal when we acknowledge, even to become a Christian, you have to confess, you have to acknowledge. And that is something that helps us, even when there's an offense, to be able to name it, to bring air to it, to bring it to the light. Mm-hmm. That helps us be able to move past it. When someone can say, you know what, I hurt you, I'm sorry. And that can help it faster. However, that's not going to happen in America. We've been waiting for, we've been free-ish for over 150 years, and we've yet to really have that.
Free-ish.
So, yeah, free-ish. Yeah, since about that time. So it's very challenging to move forward because it continues to happen, but we have to find a way. And I think there's a few other issues at play here where we have the individual and then we have the collective. And I think collectively, it will be challenging for us to move past and to heal because there's just so many issues. But I think that as we do the individual work of in spite of the opportunities that we have to become bitter, to become destructive, to become, and I understand all of it, no judgment at all. I have been some places in this past 10 days, my own self. I was indulging in a guilty pleasure on Sunday because Cube has something to say. So it's like, I understand it. However, there's so many other ways, so many ways that we can fight this fight, that we can attack it. I used to work for juvenile justice system as a counselor, and it empowered me, it invigorated me, and it was my mission to kind of be a modern day Harriet Tubman and try to bring as many children out of that system as I possibly could.
Yes.
So it's really it's hard to heal from something that continues to happen when the bandage continues to get ripped off.
Right. So yeah, I think the major question is how we can heal. And as you said, individually, yeah, we can heal. We can go to therapy. We can heal from trauma that doesn't belong to us, and trauma that does. So I have some trauma that doesn't belong to me,
or one that we may not experience firsthand.
Right. Exactly.
Seeing that
what belonged to me, like as in it didn't happen to me. Yeah. Trauma that was passed.
Right.
Yeah. Belongs to me collectively.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you can deal with that individually and counseling and clinical counseling and Christian counseling and all of the above. But the collective, until it stops happening, you can't heal from a wound that keeps becoming a wound. Yeah. You can't. It's not a. I don't see how that can happen. We have a question in these comments. How do you feel seeing a Black officer as one of the 4 and officers during protests? Were they just at work? What are your thoughts? I think absolute power corrupts absolutely. I'm going to let you ladies take after that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A power trip, and one of the ways I look at it is the group mentality, right? So if it has been, groupthink, if it hasn't been ingrained in me that this is the side that I'm on, then I'm going to behave like the side that I'm on. And so that's just
in that
basically
moment.
it.
Yeah.
In that but at the end of the day, it wasn't right. At the end of the day, but it is a group think. And I think we miss that is such a huge thing that happens in our society. Yeah. When you pick a side, you tend to think like that side, and then you tend to act like that side.
And we're socialized in that manner. That's the way armies are socialized, which is why they can go to enemy territory and
decimate.
And I wasn't going to say that. And do what sometimes needs to be done, sometimes too much. That's how, because they have the group mentality, and so that's how entire police departments can be corrupt because of that group think. That's how a whole system can be. You see something's wrong.
Yeah,
and I think that the lack of accountability. I am disturbed that I have a friend who has "I Can't Breathe" t-shirt that she had made after Eric Gardner, which almost happened 6 years ago. And now we have another person crying out that they cannot breathe because of similar tactics. So it had the root issue been addressed through legislation, through the change of culture, culture doesn't change. People, you can't really legislate hearts, but I can hold you accountable, and that can change your mind.
Yeah.
So whatever, by any means necessary, whatever needs to happen to change the fact that innocent, unarmed people are dying in that custody of police officers, where if he was passing a forged bill or selling loose cigarettes or illegal DVDs, that does know that those things do not become capital offenses.
They don't equal out death.
Right on the spot. Capital. You just gotta go. You just gotta go.
We've all made mistakes in our youth, in our lives, but for people to bring up of whatever color, just like that Veronica is saying racism doesn't have a color, you just, people of all races are racist. It, for anyone to look now at a person who is dead, who was murdered, who
Right.
was executed in front of the public, in the public eye, it's like the lynchings that used to happen in the public square. This was
Right.
a busy intersection in
Right.
Minneapolis in front of a store, a
Mhm.
public lynching to happen. And you look at it, and what you can think about is the riots. What you can think about
Right.
is
What you choose to
the
focus on.
destruction of property.
Right.
What you can think about is how he was
They
using
weren't following the rules.
$20 bill. All you can think about was the fact that he had troubles in his life. He also had kids. He
Right.
also had a mother who he was calling out for, who died 2 years ago, who he essentially was calling calling himself to her, saying, "I'm coming, mama." Like, how can you see? Like, how
and
can
not care
how
and
can
not
you do that?
recognize the
And notice
humanity.
and notice, right, exactly, and notice the criminality, but not the humanity of Black bodies. I cannot understand that. I cannot fathom you looking at criminality outside of humanity. Please miss me with it. Delete me, please, because it's to me, I can't fathom it. That
Right.
You can look at criminal behavior. If you looked at it from someone of a different color, you would call them a thug. You look at a cop do it, and you say they were doing their job. Let's look at some more comments.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One of my
lack of empathy.
So
ladies, go ahead.
So
And
I
talk.
have one from one of someone on my page, Nichelle Reed. Just found out in the time that I moved to that on some of the deeds of property is written that some properties are never to be sold to a Black person. To speak of the tip of the iceberg analogy of racism. How is that?
1968. That was declared unlawful. So but 1968, what's it? Fair Housing Act.
Okay.
Where it was declared unlawful. That still happening shouldn't be, but it's true. But
Yeah,
1968
it happens.
It also was only 52 years ago.
Yeah. It's like when I heard, and it happened not too long ago. Well, I think it's been happening for a long time, but it was brought to light, not too long ago, about African American and the hairstyles they wear to a job interview, and the way that they're allowed to wear their hair or not allowed to wear their hair. I was baffled by that because I thought how stupid, how something so simple, right, is going to affect the ability of you being able to get a job if you are prepared, if you are educated, if you're the right fit for it. But just because of the way that you choose to style your hair, they're going to say, "Oh, sorry, we don't like the way that your hair styled. So,
right.
Yeah, we're not going to hire you."
And the names and how the more ghetto your name, the less calls you get. The more, it's everywhere. It's institutional. It's ingrained in the fabric of America. Monai Gomez has a question. Even my own, one of my issues, even my own are constantly saying all lives matter, mine too. Well, this is my response. When Jesus went after one sheep, that went astray, he wasn't saying the 99 wasn't important.
Right.
He was saying that the one sheep was in danger. The one who needed him at the time. You all, thoughts on the position of the church is taking, trying not to be silent.
Whew, okay, so I got something for that.
Go for it. I applaud. Before you, she's about to go hard. I know it. I applaud. I'm gonna say this out front. Yeah. I applaud those who have stepped out and who have said, "If this is not okay," to say Black lives matter and don't just skirt the issue and say we stand against racism. For those calling out injustice against Black people in America, thank you, Nicole.
So I was fasting a few years ago, and it was right after. Yeah, so I was fasting, and at the beginning of the year, and I read something that a passage that I had read and was familiar with because the majority of my adult life At the beginning of the year, I was fasting, but I read Isaiah 58 in the Message version. And it begins in verses 1-3. It says, to all appearance, they are a nation of right living people, law abiding, God honoring. And they are asking, why is it that when we're fasting, and how many national days of prayer have we as a nation have had, and we continue to burn, and we continue to first have injustice, and we continue to not have God answer. And he says in verse 6-9, this is a kind of fast that I'm after. I remember clearly reading this passage that I'm about to read from my iPad. And when I read what was the first thing on God's heart, I wanted to throw my iPad. He said to break the chains of injustice. The first thing that God said, that this is the kind of fast that I am after. This is my heart, is to break the chains of injustice. This is what he wants. What if we as the church, as the body of Christ in this world, in America, put the same effort that we put into abortion, that we put into being against tradition or being for traditional marriage? What if we, which is it is what it is. However, this is what God is saying he is after. What if we put all of that energy, all of that fire, all that fight that we have for injustice? What would our world look like? To get rid of exploitation in the workplace, to have fair wages. This pandemic has exposed so many layers of injustice that is just ridiculous. That is showing how $1,200 in one time, what is that really going to do? That is a drop in the bucket. We live in a country where you have to work multiple jobs just to live in a decent area.
Yeah.
I was just blown back, but okay, that's another. To free the oppressed, to cancel debts. What I am interested in seeing you do is share your food with the hungry, inviting the homeless to your homes, to put clothes on shivering ill-clad. There are people who have been arrested for feeding the homeless, for trying to, give them support during this time. Right. And and to make yourself available to your own family. So instead of sometimes even within a church, we tend to be so missional that we're going outside, going past the souls in our family, in our households, to reach the ones in the world. Right. And he says that if you want to live for a full life in the emptiest of places, in verse 9, skipping down, you get rid of unfair practices. So the scales of injustice that's currently unbalanced, the fact that, Lady Justice peaks sometimes. Quit blaming the victims.
Right.
Quit blaming. Going back,
blame.
Trying to, it just, I've heard it said, we are the only people who die, and then we go on trial for getting killed. Everything that has you ever done, is brought up. I was so hurt when they did this to Botham Jean. This man was in his apartment, his place. Right. This police came into his home, kills him dead. Yep. And then on the day that he is being laid to rest, they bring up the fact that he had marijuana in his system. What does that have to do with why he died? Quit blaming the victim. Thus saith the Lord. That's what God said. Not me. Not me. Right. Oh, I'm reading from the Bible.
They went after.
Yes. So I'm done.
Before you go into the next, if the church, I'm not going to say they because I don't want anyone to think I'm talking about certain subset other than the church, because I'm talking to y'all. If you went after, legislation that seeks to that keeps people under a certain level, the way you go after legislation for abortion. If you went after legislation that keeps people poor and unable to graduate a level of life, the way you went after legislation for gay lives, if you went after legislation as it pertains to over policing and no overall
accountability
or accountability in policing, the way you go after nope, not going to say that. The way you go after these henchpin ideas that you vote for and that you go after
support, politicians.
Yeah, I'm biting my tongue. But if you were truly after the heart of God, he said, love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
That's it. He
said, all of it hinges on this. And if you really want to be an Israelite because you're worried about the 10 commandments, if you really want to be a do not kill, do not, it's also in the Old Testament. It says every 7th year you're supposed to leave your land so that the poor person can take off.
Right.
Don't fully glean your land. Don't fully pull everything off your land. Leave some for the poor.
Right.
If you want to live by the Old Testament, by the 10 commandments, if you want to bring it there, do not kill, do not steal, do not, if you want to do there, but Jesus comes along and says, all of the law and the prophets, because we are a people who are all about prophecy and faith, all the law and the prophets hang on this. Love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
But that's why I think that these people who say all lives matter don't really care. Because if all lives really mattered, you care beyond pro-birth. You would really do like what you said, Tabitha. You would go beyond just a baby in the tummy, and when when a mother gives birth, you'd be able to say, okay, here are the services that you need. Here's the help that your family may need. Here, let us support you. And when we see these type of events, where people are murdered like this, you would stand up because all lives matter, right? You would be just as passionate about it. But the truth of the matter is, it's just a way to undermine it. And people in the church, for the people in the church who are silent, it just makes me question, because of the fact that if God made us in his image and God is a God of justice, then what are we? Are we not to look for justice? Are we not to stand for those who are oppressed like Jesus did? We cannot pick and choose what we choose to follow in the Bible. We can't take things out of context for it to benefit us. Mm-hmm. We have to be real about what it is that we choose to do and how we serve God. And loving God, like you said, Tabitha, and loving your neighbor as yourself is imminent. Yeah. I mean, loving your neighbor as yourself is more than just saying, oh, hey, I love you. How you doing Sunday morning? Okay, well, have a good week. And that's it.
Exactly.
There's more to that.
It's the action word. Don't tell me you love me. Right. And there's no corresponding action. So I don't want to offend, but there was a young lady that we had a very good, I would say we actually had a good exchange, because she felt like the pastors needed to be praying and in their prayer closets. And so I just shared with her that faith without works is dead, that you just cannot just pray things away, that, you have to put action with your prayers. And sharing that Martin Luther King was a man of God. He was a reverend and pastor first. And he put, he was in them streets. He hit it hard. And I think, and going back to what you were saying, Valerie, about being pro-life and being pro-life for the entirety of the lifespan, not just in utero, so that when the baby comes forth, the mom and the child can have health care, that they can have adequate education and safe neighborhoods, and not having to be concerned about going to school and dying, just put it out there and just dying. Yeah. So being pro-life means just more than, I would think, especially if you want to use it as a Christian, more than just unborn babies in the wombs. If you're willing to let them die in school, let them die in the streets at the hands of the police, if you're willing to let them go without insurance, be malnourished, fund their schools, that's not pro-life.
That part.
That's right.
Underfunding the school,
part. But the thing is, really, so many people in the church, and I'm not going to generalize the whole church, but so many people in the church are focused on the wrong things. We are focused about fighting abortion. We're focused on being against gay marriage, but yet we'll see someone hungry on the street and won't even care about that. And it makes no sense to me. You have to advocate for everyone to be able to have a fair and equal chance at life. It's not
like, we're not saying don't go after those. That's not what we're saying. We're saying
Can you
do
add some of the things that
justice,
God say?
do justice and
Right.
love peace. That's okay. We got a comment. I'm gonna rock in a hard place. Crystal Hansen. I have a friend Irish. I said friendish. I was like, okay, I feel you. Who says yes, it was bad, and in that, but it was when, and in that, but is when was completely shocked. Oh, but in that but is when I was completely shocked. She is good and kind person, but I think she fears Black men. That's just the society we live in. She's got to be educated, and it's not the onus is not on us to educate everyone. The onus is not on the people who are oppressed to educate those who are not, those who have power. Essentially, get educated, read some books, Google some stuff. Google will get you. Google's not like Facebook. Facebook gives you just a feed of your view. I was doing this with a friend. I went out to lunch with her, 6 feet apart, all that jazz. And she was showing me her Facebook feed, and I was like, oh, that's a different America than I'm experiencing. And it's crazy how I've got all this and live, Black Lives Matter and stuff on fire and this and that. And she just got like puppies, and I'm like, it's insane the difference. So go outside of your normal purview. Go head on over to Google. Head on over to some of the Black Lives Matter movements, social to their social media. Head on over to Shaun King. Head on over to a lot of these places that have a viewpoint that's outside of yours, and be curious. I think that's the most important part. Be curious. Don't go in with a judgment to think this person's wrong. They don't align with what I'm thinking. They don't align with my party. Yeah. There's a lot of comments.
So also I'm hoping that we can add it to the link in our description.
Yeah,
but I did create a recommended viewing list and a recommended reading list.
Awesome.
So both of those. So if reading is not your thing, you can watch some movies. There's some great films that is out there. But I will say this: I didn't add one movie. I was questioning my sister's love for me when she recommended me to watch this movie. Seriously, I don't want to watch it ever in life. Detroit. And especially if you have questions, you don't understand why people are rioting and why they're looting. That is an amazing film to watch, to view. And it's done in such a way that, I don't know, I think I just over-identified, and it just took me someplace, and it's just like, I cried, and like I said, questioned my sister's love for me, like, why would you do that to me?
It's been a traumatic week. It's been a lot. You just referred to names usually associated Black people as ghetto. That's why I use the air quotes. I understand that they are unique names. I truly understand they are unique. That's why I use the air quotes. They're normally referred to as that, but I will not use that term. Preaching now. Slide. Gonna make sure, because we want to close this out. We don't want to be heard. We want to get your comments to make sure. Maybe you guys will address this later, but as a Black educator from the church's point of view, how do we educate the youth about these events in our past without passing down the anger and rage? Breezy Nicole said that. I think we talked about that a little bit earlier, to pass down the lesson. Though with I think we may diverge a little bit on the way we would say to implement this, but I think pass down the lesson and allow whatever emotion comes up to be theirs.
Right.
Instead of passing down the lesson with the anger, with the pass down the lesson once they get to a certain age where they can make judgment calls for themselves. And so a lot of history is just not taught. And I think children are smart enough to make judgment calls when they know the truth.
Right.
And I think also, like you were saying, giving a balanced view. Right. We weren't just slaves. That was not it wasn't just slavery and civil rights. That was not the entirety of people of color on this planet. That is not that's not the full picture. But being able to, as you were saying, share the lessons, share what happened, share it honestly, and even helping them process their feelings. So if anger does come up, to give them the coping skills to help them feel empowered, that just because someone has an issue with the color of their skin don't mean that they have to take on that same offense.
Mm-hmm. And I would also add to that, give them the power to be able to do something to change what they disagree with, right? So if I'm angry about this, what can I do today? What are the resources available today? Am I of age? Can I go vote?
Right.
Can I protest? Can I, speak against this? Can I get educated? You know what I'm saying? You have to be able to then follow through with, okay,
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from. I understand that you're angry, and I'm going to support you through that. But besides that, what else can we do?
I have family here visiting, and my two nieces were protesting and screaming like Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and no justice, no peace from my living room. But I also made a point of buying Ben and Jerry ice cream for everyone yesterday, and allowing them and helping them know that this is a company that sees us, that supports us, and I'm going to give them my money.
Right. Exactly. That's what it is. Like I said, do your research. I'm going to give some tips just because a lot of people have been out in this fight, and we are so grateful. So many voices that have been silent before are speaking up. This is how we get change, when we learn to unite our voices, to put them together, to make one loud, resounding voice, saying the same thing. So here's some tips. If you want to be an ally, if you are not Black and you're not in the struggle with us, or you don't have a darker hue of skin, but you want to join the fight, here are just a few tips. It's cursory, it's not all of it, that you can do truly. And I've talked about one of them already. Number one, research. Do your research. Like I said, the burden is not on the oppressed to bring the education level of those who are not oppressed up. The onus is on the person who wants to learn. So please, there are so many resources out there. We'll get some to you. Redo your research. That's number one. Stand with us when we are in difficult times like this, not just now. When the big lights are gone, when the protests end, and you hear something that someone says that's racist, say something. And you hear someone saying something that's prejudiced, not just against Black people, prejudice, period. If they talk about Jews, if they talk about gays, if they talk about Hispanics, say something.
Right.
Every single time. And that person will either line up or they'll stop saying it around you. If they stop saying it around enough people, they won't say it at all. Number three, talk to your family.
Yes.
Because you seeing the light means nothing if you're not a light on the hill. Be a light on the hill for others, for justice for others. Talk to your family, because the way you saw before you saw the light, before you saw the Black Lives Matter is not an affront to anyone. Before you saw that it's just an ask for inclusion, you learned how to see that way. So those who taught you, you now must teach them. Talk to your family, your parents. Have that conversation with your siblings. Have that conversation with your children. Talk to your family. Number four, vote. Vote with your conscience, not your pocket. Lives are more important than bottom lines.
Yes.
Period. Lives are more important than bottom lines. I'm not going to say anything else to that. And number five, realize that if your life is homogenous, if you only see you around, you are a part of the problem.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Be empowered to think well.